Aaron stood before the crumbling remnants of what had once been a library. Jagged walls jutted toward a reddened sky, and broken pillars dotted the ash-covered ground like dislodged teeth. In the twilight, the rust-stained rubble almost looked alive, as if it might stir at any moment. She ran her fingers along a shattered block of stone, feeling the dust grind into her skin. This place was rumored to be the last repository of knowledge outside the authorities' sanitized vaults, a forbidden zone not even the devout would approach without cause. But for Aaron and those who followed her, it was their best chance at saving the truth from oblivion. Since the establishment of the authority, all mention of the old world had been systematically erased from common memory. Every day, printed materials, digital devices, and other records were rounded up, inspected, then purged, if deemed inconsistent with current doctrine. The Watchers, dressed in hooded cloaks and armed with rifles, carried out these daily hunts with machine-like precision. It was said you could tell a Watcher by their hollow eyes. Years of methodical destruction had sapped them of the capacity to question. Aaron had once admired them from a distance, back when she didn't know better. She had believed, like so many others, that they were protecting the community from dangerous misinformation. Now she knew the Watchers were puppets in service to the authorities' twisted aim, endless, unceasing control. She knelt among the rubble, struggling to pry open a half-buried box. Sweat trickled down her brow. "It's here," she whispered, glimpsing the cover of a battered notebook. The letters were faded, hardly legible, but she recognized the symbol, a rising sun with radiating lines. Legend said it was a sign from before the collapse, a symbol of hope. Without pausing, she pulled it free. The pages felt fragile under her touch, brittle and stained, but they were intact. Remnants of words showed that someone, long ago, had chronicled daily life, an honest reflection, presumably written before the authorities' oppressive regime ruled the land. Light footsteps approached from behind. She turned, eyes wide, only to relax as she saw Jessa, her friend and confidant, stepping softly through the broken archway. Jessa's gray cloak was smeared with dust, and her usually neat braids sagged from the day's long trek. "Did you find anything?" Jessa asked, voice hushed. Aaron held up the notebook. "It might be a diary, possibly older than anything we have." Jessa fetched a cloth bag and gently placed the artifact inside. "We need to move. The Watchers are on patrol near the perimeter. Let's avoid them if we can." Aaron nodded. They made their way out with quick, measured steps, weaving around heaps of twisted rebar and shards of glass. The ground was accustomed to the weight of their boots, for they had come here countless times, always at great personal risk. Every piece of recovered text, every meager scrap of genuine history, was a precious gift. A small step toward reminding people that the authorities' daily rewriting of events was a grand deception. Evidence of the true past had to survive, even if only in whispers. Outside the library's fractured facade, the wind carried the stale scent of decay. They slipped behind a collapsed water tower and skirted through the labyrinth of rubble. After some time, they reached a secret tunnel carved beneath the shell of an old building. Once it had been a store, or perhaps a workshop. Now, hidden behind an iron grate, it served as an entryway to the underground refuge that Aren, Jessa, and a handful of allies called home. Inside the refuge, the flickering glow of lanterns revealed a warren of cramped chambers. Crowded shelves groaned under the weight of salvaged books, journals, and mismatched papers. Aren drew in a breath, heart pounding with a mix of pride and fear. This library in hiding was one of the last remaining pockets of historical truth. Spread across the worn wooden tables were dictionaries with missing pages, old atlases with cracked spines, novels from authors long forgotten. Comrades parsed through these texts night after night, comparing details, searching for any facts that might contradict the authorities' latest iteration of history. A quiet hush fell over the group's daily meeting. Several faces turned expectantly to Aaron and Jessa. One of them, a tall, lean man named Doran, stepped forward. His left eye was covered by a makeshift patch, an injury sustained during a run-in with Watchers. "Any luck?" he asked. Aaron set the battered notebook on a table. We think this predates the authorities' rule by decades. The condition suggests it was hidden away early on, never discovered by watchers. If there are references to the old laws or the technology we used to have, it could help us piece together the real story. Dorn picked up the diary, gingerly flipping through a few pages. This is valuable. We must protect it at all costs. They all knew what protection meant, hiding it deep within the labyrinth of the underground library, scanning its pages to create duplicates, in hopes at least one copy would remain if watchers burned the original. It was risky. Equipment for scanning was outlawed, and one slip could cost them their lives. The stakes were too high to not try. Aaron recalled a memory from when she was younger, before she understood the meaning of censorship. She'd seen her parents burn old prints in a backyard pit at the behest of a local authority official. Her mother, tears streaming, hadn't said a word. At the time, Aaron thought they were simply disposing of garbage. Only later did she realize her parents were forced to consign their own heritage to flames. That was the authorities' power. It could turn people into accomplices in the destruction of their own past. During the night, Aaron helped Jessa carefully scan the notebook page by page, using a jury-rigged device hooked to antique lenses and a precious solar battery. Faint humming noises filled the chamber, accompanied by the scratch of Jessa's notes listing page numbers and transcriptions. The raw details they discovered were stunning. References to towering skyscrapers, highways that span the continent, entire stored archives of knowledge available at the click of a button. The changes in daily life were astounding. People had once possessed advanced medicine, free press, universal education. They had possessed a collective consciousness that the authority had systematically dismantled, one erased page at a time. Jessa finally let out a low, impressed whistle. They were on the verge of something called artificial intelligence. It seems they worried it might replace honest work or cause moral dilemmas. The diaries mentioned debates in courts, proposals in government offices. Aaron's mind whirled, and all of it was wiped away. Did they mention any conflict with an organization resembling the authority? Not explicitly by that name, but there's mention of a cult that tried to sabotage libraries and data centers. The writer seemed concerned that people were turning to some extremist ideology. Perhaps that was a forerunner of the authority. Jessa exhaled. It's an eerie parallel. Aaron nodded. She felt a surge of determination. This diary was more than a relic. It was evidence that people once had free will, choices, and progress. Knowing these details added new layers to their mission. She and the others in the refuge had to safeguard not just the diaries and books, but the idea that truth could exist outside the authorities' dominion. The next day arrived with the screech of watchers patrolling the streets. From various vantage points, rebels in the underground tunnels kept watch with battered binoculars. Through little peepholes and periscopes, they observed the cult-like gatherings above. At dawn, the authorities' robed thurifiers carried incense braziers, chanting about the purifying flame. They called upon the faithful to witness the daily rewriting of the past. That morning's ceremony involved the burning of a recently uncovered photography collection. Even from a distance, the watchers' torches were visible, bright orange tongues licking at the sky, turning precious images to curling gray ash. Aaron clenched her fists. I can't stand by anymore. Doran placed a hand on her shoulder. Don't let grief guide you. We have to be strategic. We've been strategic for too long. We have enough people to cause a disruption, Aaron insisted. If we can stop just one burning, we might rescue crucial evidence. Something big enough to fracture the authorities' narrative. Jessa stepped forward. They burned my grandmother's wedding portraits last year, erased them from existence. Every time I think about it, it's like my entire family history is being torn from me. I want to fight too, but we must consider the consequences. Dorn massaged his temples. Everyone in the refuge was balancing a desire to strike back with the terror of the Watcher's brutal retribution. We need a plan. If we sabotage the Watcher's ceremony, we'll reveal ourselves. Aaron sighed. I know, but waiting in the darkness won't change anything. The authority is intensifying their purges. They're rewriting history more frequently. Soon, no one will question it, not even in secret. From the corner, a woman named Leanne spoke up. She was older, her hair peppered with silver, and her eyes carried a wisdom that penetrated the gloom. "We need a time and place where we can intercept critical artifacts before they're destroyed, then vanish before the Watchers realize what's happened." She paused, letting the tension in the room settle. "I have a contact someone on the inside. She informs me that tomorrow, the Watchers plan to ceremonially burn an entire cargo of old medical records and historical transcripts. They're calling it a final purge of defunct knowledge." Everyone glanced at Leanne. She continued, "My contact says these documents are from a secret storehouse in the northern quadrant. They were discovered relatively intact. The Watchers want to make a public spectacle of their destruction, to stamp out any hint that people once had advanced healthcare and science." Aaron glanced at Jessa, who looked just as galvanized. "That's it then? That's where we strike." They spent the day preparing. Rebels drafted elaborate routes of escape through side streets and collapsed tunnels. They organized a small team that would move quietly among the onlookers, distract the Watchers, and seize as many crates of documents as possible. In hushed voices, they practiced signals for fallback, for rallying, for scattering to safe houses if cornered. Fear gnawed at the back of Arn's mind. They had never launched such a bold operation, one that required them to step out of the refuge and confront the Watchers openly. Yet the discovery of the diary reminded her powerfully of all that people could achieve if only they remembered. Twilight spread a sooty half-light across the sky as Arn and the others slipped above ground. The air was sticky, and the city's broken silhouettes slumped in gloom. Sounds of echoing footfalls and distant chanting resonated in the deserted streets. Doran led the way, one hand gripping a small pistol. Jessa followed, her dagger hidden in the folds of her cloak. Others fanned out to form a loose perimeter. Dim lanterns on street corners flickered in the wind, casting jittery shadows. Around a bend, they spotted a group of Watchers already assembling near a platform piled high with crate. The Watchers wore their signature black coats, each bearing a red insignia of an eye crowned by flame, marking them as enforcers of daily truth. Aaron counted at least a dozen Watchers armed with rifles. More might be hidden in the surrounding buildings. Residents, drawn by fear and curiosity, formed a crowd at a wary distance. Citizens compelled to witness the authorities' daily performance. Thralls wearing the authorities' symbols scurried to light torches and set up a dais for the officiant. A carved statue, presumably representing the authorities' founder, loomed behind them, its face worn smooth by centuries of well-meaning but destructive worship. A booming voice crackled from a rudimentary sound system. "Brothers and sisters, we gather again to correct the world's broken record of the past, to cleanse falsehood and error that mislead us from the path of righteousness." An emaciated officiant in flowing robes lifted a jewel-encrusted staff. Behind him stood the Watchers, stony-faced. "Today, these crates of medical transcripts and scientific heresy will burn, ensuring that we are not burdened by the illusions of a flawed era." Aaron's heart pounded. This was the moment. She locked eyes with Jessa, who subtly nodded. Under the cover of the officiant's sermon, a few rebels edged toward the platform. Aaron moved carefully, posture hunched to avoid drawing attention from the Watchers' roving gazes. The cutting stench of incense filled her nostrils. The Watchers formed a line on the platform, brandishing torches above crates labeled with medical icons and official seals. Some bystander might see them as wards against disease, they'd been told, but Aaron knew it was knowledge that was about to be incinerated. Suddenly, a whisper rustled through the crowd. One of the rebels, Tarek, stumbled out of the throng, feigning a seizure. He flailed, gasping, calling for help. Confused onlookers parted around him in alarm. The Watchers were momentarily distracted. Two of them rushed forward to subdue Tarek, dragging him upright by the collar of his jacket. Jessa seized the opportunity. She leapt onto the platform, darting behind a stack of crates. Aaron followed, keeping low. Her spine prickled with tension. The officiant raised his staff again, about to pronounce the fires to be lit. That was when Aaron and Jessa struck. Jessa brandished a contraption she had brought, essentially a handheld smoke bomb, rigged with small chemical canisters. She slammed it down. A harsh hiss filled the air. Pinkish-gray smoke billowed across the platform, enveloping watchers, crates, and the officiant. Shouts erupted. Watchers coughed, fanning the smoke away with their arms, rifles clattering as they tried to regain order. Citizens scrambled in fear. In the chaos, Aaron and another rebel hefted 2 crates off the platform, each heavy with thousands of pages of old transcripts. A searing bullet whizzed past Aaron's ear, but the smoke shielded them. She stumbled off the dais and passed the boxes to other rebels who were waiting. All around them, watchers were emerging from the cloud, eyes reddened, trigger fingers twitching. "There they are!" yelled a masked watcher. Gunfire barked, splitting the night. Aaron dove behind a toppled metal barrier, heart hammering in her chest. She could hardly breathe in the swirling haze. Jessa was crouched next to her, checking to ensure the crates were in the rebels' possession. Doran signaled from across the street that they had the cargo. Tarek, freed from the watcher's grip in the confusion, scrambled to rejoin them, though he limped from a savage blow to his leg, ears ringing. Aaron raised her pistol and fired twice at the watchers to keep their heads down. The discharge echoed in the tight space. Citizens screamed, scattering in all directions. The officiant's voice rose above the bedlam, calling for calm, but no one listened. With signals and shouted commands, the rebels withdrew into side alleys, lugging crates between them. Aaron slammed an empty magazine out, replaced it with a fresh one. Her fingers trembled, but adrenaline fueled her movements. A few watchers gave chase, but the rebels knew the labyrinth of side streets far better. They ducked under collapsed scaffolds, hopped over shattered steps, and wove through a tangle of abandoned vehicles. In a matter of minutes, they were gone, leaving behind a scene of uproar. Pinkish smoke, blazing torches, watchers barking orders to seize any suspected conspirators. That night, back within the refuge, the rebels pried open the crates. Inside, they discovered dusty file folders typed across thick pages, medical histories, research notes, lab results for diseases believed eradicated in the old world. They found annotated journals discussing vaccines, surgeries, gene therapy. Reading through them, Aaron felt both awe and sorrow. How many lives had been lost because the authority had deemed such knowledge heretical? As the excitement buzzed among their group, the older woman Leon approached Aaron. "I'm proud of what you did tonight. Because of you, thousands of pages of vital information survived." Aaron drew a shaking breath. "We barely made it out. We risked exposing the entire refuge." "But you did not. Keep faith. Times are changing." Leon's eyes glistened in the lantern light. "You see, the more the authority tries to rewrite history, the more determined people become to cling to whatever truths they can find." In the refuge's makeshift infirmary, Tarek lay on a cot, grimacing from the pain in his leg. Jessa was wrapping his wound as best she could. Nearby, some of the newly acquired documents displayed advanced medical treatments that dwarfed their current knowledge. Together, they studied the pages, searching for ways to heal injuries, treat diseases festering in their hidden community. Hope began to outweigh despair. Nonetheless, the dawn brought fresh trials. Word spread that watchers had raided 6 homes in search of rebels. The authority pledged retribution for the attack on knowledge purification. Whispers reached the refuge that the watchers had posted new patrols around the city, arresting suspected collaborators. Even the cult's daily announcements changed, referencing a dangerous ring of seditionists who manipulate the unsuspecting. Aaron's group had effectively become public enemy number 1. Each revised statement from the authority twisted the truth. They recast the stolen crates as containing demonic texts, claimed the watchers had saved the public from a vile plague of misinformation. The officiant took to the broadcast stations, urging citizens to remain vigilant against infiltration. And still, every day at sunrise, the watchers carried out symbolic burnings, as if to assure everyone that the authority maintained an iron grip on the narrative. Aaron felt a sense of urgency deep in her bones. She realized their refuge, once safe and discreet, was no longer invulnerable. The watchers grew more aggressive, emptying entire streets during routine checks, barging into dwellings without warning. Sooner or later, they were bound to discover the extensive subterranean library. "We need to disperse," Aaron said gravely one evening, addressing the group gathered among the shelves. We can't keep everything in one place anymore. If they find us, we lose all of it. Jessa frowned. But where can we go? There aren't many safe places left in the city. The Watchers keep records of every building still standing. Aaron took a deep breath. Then we spread out beyond the city. We create smaller pockets, hidden caches of knowledge. We can bury sealed containers, load them onto carts disguised as scrap, even smuggle them across the wastelands if needed. Staying in one spot makes us an easy target. Doran folded his arms. That means we lose the benefits of central organization. We'll rely on coded communication, Aaron replied. Messenger pigeon still exists in the outskirts. We'll leave signs and signals in places Watchers don't think to look. Even if half of our caches are discovered, the other half might survive. Lion leaned forward, tapping her fingers on a battered copy of a bygone atlas. I've heard rumors that beyond the southern ridge, there's a free settlement. They might share our mission. If we can find them, we can build alliances, exchange knowledge. A murmur of hope rippled through the group. The notion of forging an alliance with another community that refused to submit to the authority was an enticing prospect. Aaron's mind flicked to the battered diary they had salvaged. Its words had revealed a civilization that once connected far-flung cities, despite differences, working collectively to advance humanity. Perhaps they could reclaim that spirit. After days of meticulous planning, the group made the decision to separate. They spent countless hours inventorying their library, selecting essential texts to send to different hideouts. They scheduled staggered departures so as not to draw attention with a mass exodus. Packets of historical narratives, scientific treatises, diaries, and novels were carefully wrapped in oilcloth to protect them from dust and weather. Caches were bound for abandoned farmhouses, forest enclaves, and rumored pockets of dissent. Each rebel carried a portion of humankind's memory, determined to preserve it. Aaron hoisted her backpack, glancing around the refuge's dim corridors one last time. She recalled the nights spent poring over old manuscripts, deciphering archaic terminologies, marveling at images of airplanes, satellites, and even landing modules on other planets. The knowledge that humanity had once soared beyond earthly confines felt too precious to lose. She swallowed a lump in her throat. "We'll meet again," whispered Jessa, stepping to Aaron's side. "One day, we'll reunite and see how these seeds of truth have grown." Tears glistened in Aaron's eyes. She looked at Dorn, Tarek, Lian, and the others, each preparing for perilous journeys. "Promise me we won't stop. If the authority tries to burn our past, we'll spread it so far they can never destroy it all." Jessa's lips curled into a trembling smile. "They can't erase what lives in our hearts. Not forever." Quiet farewells were exchanged. Groups peeled away, venturing out in separate directions. Arendt and Jessa left with a small band heading toward the southern ridge. They moved at night, following remnants of roads half buried in dust. In the distance, plumes of black smoke rose wherever Watchers continued their bonfires of revision. The travelers pressed on, skirting watchtowers and guard outposts, driven by the convictions that propelled them forward. At dawn, they took shelter in an abandoned barn. Arn's mind drifted to the battered diary, now hidden in her pack. Its pages testified to a time of different beliefs and technology, a testament to a world that had once been flawed but undeniably alive with possibility. She felt a renewed surge of resolve. One day people would read those words freely, away from the authorities' tyranny. One day the diaries would be more than contraband. They would be guides, reminding humanity of what had been and what could be again. Jessa sat beside her, exhausted. They shared a canteen of water and a handful of dried fruits. Outside, the wind moaned across the desolate fields. Questions about tomorrow lingered in the chill air. Would they find the rumored settlement? Would Watchers track them? Would the authority inevitably tighten its grip further? Yet even in the throes of doubt, Aaron felt something spark inside her, a gentle, resilient flame that refused to be snuffed out. She glanced at Jessa. "I wonder if the next generation will look back on this time and marvel at how hard we fought to keep the past alive." "Emily," Jessa replied. "Someday, children will learn how we refused to bow down. how we traveled across the wildlands carrying a library on our backs. Aaron laid her head against the barn's wooden wall, the diaries and documents pressed protectively against her chest. She imagined a future uncorrupted by the authorities' daily distortions. A world where knowledge was celebrated, not condemned. A world where the songs of old were sung again, and the achievements of past scientists and leaders were hailed, not vilified. Perhaps this dream was distant, intangible, but it was real enough to guide her actions. It was real enough to be worth everything. Tomorrow they would continue their steps across the charred and broken landscape, battered but unyielding. At every possible moment they would share snippets of the truth with wandering travelers, with frightened villagers, even with the occasional watcher who dared to question. Bit by bit, they would break the authorities' iron hold on memory. Because truth, once scattered widely, could never truly be contained. And though the authority persisted in rewriting its version of the world each day, Auren and her allies would preserve the true story in all the hidden corners of the land, ready to bloom in minds no longer afraid to read.